Hey guys,
Howdy.
how are you guys doing? Welcome everybody to the Stream Team Beekeeping Chat tonight. We're working on 3 years now. We've been doing this a while, guys. It's pretty
Can you
exciting
believe it?
stuff.
Three
It's
years.
hard to believe. As you can see, Ian is not on here yet, but he is close. He's en route. He'll probably tell us what he's been doing, but he's been real busy. I think he's been doing some harvesting of some different things. He can tell us what he's been doing maybe when he hops on here. But while we're waiting for Ian to hop on here in just a couple of minutes, hold on. Okay. Yeah, while we're waiting for Ian to hop on here, why don't we go around the horn, guys, and see what's going on in your neck of the woods? Why don't we start off with you, Brian? What's going on up there in Northeast Ohio?
One word. Feed.
Yep, feed
No,
the bees.
I put that new Hive Alive, their Easy Feed Super Syrup on, and I was blown away with how fast they took it. I put two of the 2 pound little bags on each colony. I put it on what was it, Monday? I went back over on Thursday to check it, and they were gone literally in 3 days. So if you were to use that, I'll say this: I would think utilizing that product is more like uh, additional. I'll say because you would need a ton. They wipe it out clean. So
Sure.
like my colonies, they've all gone through 4 bags of that stuff already.
Yeah.
So, and they've got buckets on it, and they've taken like half a bucket each already. So they're doing good. I mean, things are looking good. I had one colony that it's the one that I lopped the queen's head off trying to mark her. I
Mm,
squished it and she did her little seizure. So that didn't really turn out so hot. And then that thing never made another queen. They went through their little issues. I tried doing a combine. They killed the queen that I put over. There was the battle royale, and I finally just the other day was like, "You jokers are done." So I
yeah.
literally was just walking around the apiary with frames of bees, and I'm like, "Yeah, that hive looks like it could use a little bit." Shake a little bit there, grabbed another 2 frames, shake a little bit over here. But things are okay. I mean, we're at that point now up here at least where it's just getting them to that final point where they have enough weight that's going to carry them through the winter, and that's it. So,
Yeah.
but pretty good though. I'm more comfortable looking at how the colonies are like size wise, weight wise. I'm more comfortable now than what I was last year. So, and I know I have less colonies than what I did last year going into the winter, but they're stronger. So I'm hoping that this winter my losses aren't that high, and then I'll just next year I'll make it up real quick. So hopefully,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that those little feeding packets are pretty small, so the bees can
yeah,
a full size colony can gobble those things down pretty quick. And so anyway, those are I've got some I may try here. I'm thinking about maybe trying them when I do some splits and maybe some nukes, maybe some smaller nukes. They may
yeah.
work pretty well, but throw them on a double deep colony, man, and they're going to just consume it. Uh,
You would literally now there's enough room there size wise for
mhm,
10 frame equipment. You could probably put 4 of those bags in one colony, um, easy, and
yeah,
they would not literally. I would say they would probably annihilate it in 3 or 4 days.
yeah.
So for a decent sized colony,
Okay. Well, before we move on, I appreciate everyone hopping on. Just a quick update. Ian is on his way. He's been out. I think he's been out on the farm. That guy works really hard. He works incredibly long hours. Greg, you can kind of commiserate with that a little bit. But I also wanted, so he'll be on here in just a few minutes. He's on his way. He just messaged me and said he's on his way. Well, but we're just kind of going around the horn here a little bit and discussing some issues beforehand. I did want to before we hop over to your neck of the woods, I wanted to talk a little bit about just if we could all just man these storms that are coming through are just crazy. You know, Helene. all the damage. I think the last time we had a chat with all three of us on here, Helene, was just, it was barreling in, and we talked
Mm-hmm.
a little bit, and boy, look at the devastation with that storm. And then I'm not sure, you guys probably got a little bit of the outside edges of that. I know you guys got some rain during that time frame, and then now we
Yeah.
have this crazy storm that's making landfall pretty much as we speak. It's right in the process of just wreaking havoc on a lot of actually beekeepers probably that we get in this chat here, and a lot of commercial guys down in the Big Bend area of Florida, Central Florida. And so hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to them, and we certainly hope that they that people can fare okay with this, and that we have minimal loss of life. Property can be replaced, bees can be replaced, but
Yeah.
people, you can't replace people. And so hopefully people can get through this thing pretty good, and coming on the other side, it seems like we're pretty resilient with these storms down here in the south, and I'm sure things will turn out okay. Going to go ahead and hop to you, Greg. Tell us what's going on up there in your neck of the woods.
Well, I'm not going to lie, I'm having a hard time right now. Just my heart feels heavy and chewed up for all the things that we're seeing, all the folks, all the reports that we're hearing. And to be honest, it's kind of hard for me to get my head in the bee game right now with everything else going on. So I want to put that out there. It's so hard. What do you say? How can you support these folks? I think the only thing that we can do at this point now is pray for them and let them know that we're thinking about them, we're praying for them. It doesn't make it any easier to try to say the right thing, or it's just my heart's so chewed up right now thinking about it. To shake loose of that and to go right into a bee chat like nothing's going on is, for me, it's a little challenging to say the least. But that's a part of the whole thing is moving on, moving through. There's so many folks in this chat here. I see Tar Heel Beekeeper, Randy, he's down that neck of the woods. Keith Spielman, a lot of these guys are down. Lindsay Homestead, they're all down in the Appalachians, and they're just taking a cruel beating. And the folks here in Florida they're in it right now. And so I just want folks to know I'm really thinking about you, praying for you. My heart's broke for you. I don't think we can have enough sympathy or empathy for those folks, but just to let you guys know, we're not just moving on talking about bees like everything's hunky-dory. We're thinking about you. Sort of reminds me, Bruce, when you kind of cruise through Proverbs, these kind of things are they're reminders for us all. If we're laying our treasures up where moth and rust can eat and decay, where they can be stolen and pillaged and plunged, if we're mindful of where we're laying our treasures up, if we are putting all of our effort in laying treasure up on earth, wherever we lay our treasure up is where our heart will be. And so it's a reminder of I think those ideas where it says, behold the fowl of the air. They don't plant, they don't reap. God provides for them every single day. And that's where my mind is at right now. These folks are literally losing everything. All these things on earth are, like you said, can be replaced. They're getting washed out. They're getting destroyed. But I have faith, and I believe, and I'm praying for these folks that God will meet every need coming out of this forum. And I'm having a really hard time kind of articulating what's on my heart and what's on my mind for these folks. But here we are, so.
Yeah, I totally understand, and I feel the same way. It's hard to, I'm a big football fan. I love my bees. I love my sports, but there are some big games this weekend, and that just happened. And I've been so just tied up in knots about these people that are suffering, that some of the things that I put emphasis in sometimes just, they don't seem like they matter near as much right now. But anyway, I am down here. My brother he was on a business. He was doing work up in Knoxville, Tennessee this past weekend, ran into some truck trouble. And so I drove up there and back, and we did some things. So I didn't do anything with the bees this weekend, but we have our guest in here. Ian is in the backstage. We're about to add him on here, and here we go.
Hey,
there
fellas.
He is.
I'm sure, Ian, how goes it, sir?
I'm afraid to clean up for you guys too well.
Man, I heard you've been on a tractor or a combine or something, haven't you?
Yeah, today I was on a tractor. I was supposed to be on a combine, but the grain dryer fuse blew last night, so we didn't get any. We ran it 24 hours. We didn't get any grain drying last night. So then the combines caught up today, and they just parked the semis in the field. So we only needed 2 guys in the field. They put me to do some tillage. So I was on the field tractor. It's a lot easier to get off the field tractor than the combine.
I'm sure it is. And we really appreciate you coming on tonight. Anyone who's in the comments here, the title of this is a Q&A session with Ian Steppler and the stream team, so to speak. So please throw some comments or some questions in the comments section here. Would be best if you could put them in all caps. That way we'll be able to see them easier. And so while folks are trying to think about questions they might want to bring to you, Ian, just tell us kind of what's going on up there. Obviously, you're in the middle of a lot of busy farm work, but tell us kind of where you're at with everything right now.
Yeah, for sure. Boy, I'm so tired this time of year. Just exhausted. Man, I don't know if my eyes don't lie. I am done. But I'm having it like I love this. This is the time of year, right? This is what I live for. Just bringing in this wealth of harvest coming in. We're long done the honey harvest. We had a really good honey year too. I'll say that very modestly, because a lot of beekeepers in Manitoba had trouble. But we were able to pull off one of my better crops. Mm. And that exhausted me. And then we moved right into the grain harvest. And that's another big glut of work. And we're slugging through it. We just had this huge windstorm come through. It was last week, and we took some loss because of that. But, that's just how it goes. And the bees are in pretty good shape. They are medicated now. They're treated for mites. I have that under control. We can talk about that later. They're fed up. So we'd have pails on them still just to top them up, because I like to plug them right out just to make sure I have enough in there to get them through winter. So they're ready to be put into the shed. So we are basically at the point now, Carrie's going through and just switching out some old equipment, putting some new equipment in that I had built for me. And we're going to start vaporizing with oxalic acid probably as soon as Carrie's done this round of just tidy up. She'll be going out with the vaporizer, and we'll try to get it done twice. Once for sure, try to get it twice before we put them inside. And it's when they're going to be put in, I'm not exactly sure. We've had a very mild, warm fall, and if this trend continues, it feels like it's going to be warm all winter. But I know better than to think like that. It's going to turn like a dime, and things will get cold. So if we can get the oxalic acid into them twice, I think I'll be happy with that. If not, then it's whatever. But I'm gunning for last week of October. I'm going to put them inside. I'm actually invested into a refrigeration unit to put into my winter shed here, and it hasn't been installed yet. Hopefully the guy gets it into this week, beginning next week, so then I can get the bees in a little more of a timely manner and not have to worry about, when it cools down, you can put the bees in the shed, but then you're always worried about that warm spill that comes later on that overheats the shed. With refrigeration, it's going to allow me to put them in more comfortably. So I'll put them in into the month and then crank that thing up and see if it works. Yeah, that's basically where I'm at.
Just got a couple of tasks ahead, huh? You're in the middle of a bunch of tasks and just a couple to go, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's the time of year.
Well, don't see a lot of questions in here yet, so I don't think, do we have anything coming in yet? Got one question here. I'm not sure. Just if you want to, have you tried the Appy tablets, and are they working? From Randy, Klingham Farms.
Yeah, I have tried them, and I'm seeing some interesting things from them. This is just purely my observation, because I understand this is like a supplement. It's not a registered treatment, but there's thymol in there. So the thymol is what I'm after, and that thymol is what drops the mites. So I put the Appy tablet in, or maybe I should back up quite a bit here. After the honey pull, we had kind of a late flow. Extended. Usually I'm done the flow, middle of August or treating, and we get things in good time. But this year extended into, the back half of August, and I got my treatments in a little bit late. So I put Apivar in, and the Apivar has been kind of touch and go for me these last few years, but it seemed to be like I had trouble with it. Was it 3 years ago? And then I tried it again, and it worked, and then it worked again. and then I'm using it again this year, and it seemed to not, the mite counts are escalating. Like in the fall, you all understand how that works. Like you have your low mite shakes with the big brood nest, and as that brood nest emerges, gets smaller, and more bees get out on the bees, and the summer population drifts away. So you have those dynamics going on. So I had a very low mite count when I put the strips in, and they were escalating just a little bit too much for my comfort. So what I did was I then turned directly towards a thymol treatment, and I used Api Life VAR on most of my colonies to get a knockdown. I also used Api tablet to get a knockdown. So I'm using those two products for the thymol to get what I wanted. And I wanted two things. I wanted to knock down the mites, but I also wanted to shut down the brood nest. I put them in middle of September, and going into October. So as the brood nest is naturally shrinking. So I wanted to accelerate that a little bit so I can get a broodless state and then follow up with oxalic acid, kill the mites. So I put the Api Life VAR in and the Api tablet, and I monitored with a sticky board underneath. And those products, I'm not sure if it's just the thymol product or if it's a synergy with the thymol and the Apivar going on in there, but they drop mites every day, 100 mites, 100 mites, 100 mites, 100 mites. They're just dropping mites for about a week. It was just beautiful to watch. The Api tablet performed exactly the same way as the Api Life VAR did. And as I understand it, like this fellow asked about the Api tablet. As I understand it, the Api tablet's supposed to be systemic. They're supposed to ingest it, and somehow the bees feed on the mites feed on the bee, and it drops the mites. But this was happening. That it was almost like a flash was going on. The mites are dropping almost immediately. Actually, it acted exactly like the Api Life VAR. So I think that the product was working as a flash treatment. And I seen it worked. I was very happy with it. The one thing I did notice with the Api tablet, I noticed two things. One thing was it did not shut the brood nest down the same way as the Api Life VAR did. And I noticed that after about a week, the bees encased those little tablets. They propolized them up and they covered them on wax. They just sealed them off. And as soon as they did that, I didn't get any more mite drop. So it's kind of interesting. I don't know much about the product. I didn't talk to the maker of the product because I want to stay away from him. I don't want to be bothered with that kind of stuff. I just want to observe what's going on within my nest. And that's kind of what I found.
Interesting.
Where do you think that product has a point in use, Ian? I know you use Api Life VAR. I'm not real familiar. Is there a restriction with you guys using ApiGuard, using the thymol gel in your area?
That's not registered. No, we can't use that. And this
so that makes sense.
Yeah, the Api tablet's not registered either. It's a supplement, so we're feeding it as a health product.
It's there as a secondary non-marketed result is that you're seeing it dropping down. Because I wondered why would you go with a product like that if there's ApiGuard available? But that makes sense. If ApiGuard's not registered and you can't use it.
We don't have
using the app. Okay, so the Api tablet being a supplement, kind of it flies under the radar on all the things there. So what we noticed with the Api tablets is when we tried to measure out, we'd have to go back to that stream that we did it live here. Yeah. The amount of thymol that was in the Api tablet was I think we were maybe like a 70% dose of ApiGuard. For the amount of thymol that was in it. And so as far as it taking your breath away and burning your hands, it was just as though we were using the gel. So as an interesting feedback you have, but it makes sense that you would try that because ApiGuard is not a tool that you have available for your toolbox.
Yeah, Api Life VAR, and we have Thymol VAR available. I didn't use Thymol VAR for no specific reason. It was Api Life VAR is on the shelf. The guy had it, so I bought it. That's the only reason. I was after the thymol. That's what I was after.
Yeah, sure.
And the thymol, it's strong stuff. Holy man, his little wafers, very delicate little wafers. You can cut them in half, and you put them in the colonies, and the bees do not like that stuff. Ooh, they push right away from it. And I observed the brood nest, and they were pulling their larvae out Like the nest was shrinking at that time. It was getting smaller, so it was about the size of my fist at that time. But the queen was laying. There's cap brood, but any larvae, they're pulling them out. So
Wow.
it was ending the nest, and that's kind of what I wanted at that time, because I wanted the nest to disappear, and then all the phoretic mites will then, get rid of them. So that's kind of what we're after with that, anyways. But the Apitabulate, it's a supplement, but the supplement has thymol in there for some health reasons. I'm not sure why they have it in there, but I used the Apitabulate for the thymol in there to see if it would act against the mites, and it definitely did. It certainly did.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I didn't when I tried 1 pack of those, and that worked, worked fine for my numbers, just getting 1 pack. But the issue when I got my pack was, when I got it, it was the package was busted all open, and there was, of like the 10 tablets in it, 4 of them were, just, it's like somebody took a hammer. There was powder falling out of the box when I walked into the house, and I thought, oh, well, crap. And there was absolutely no thymol smell at all.
Yeah, you should have taken that back to the distributor. Yeah.
So like any effect that would have had, like that flash, like you said, it happened en route through the USPS.
Ian, good question here from Noah. I think just kind of piggybacking on what we were just discussing, it says, and I think you could you kind of briefly described earlier your Mite, I think quickly describe your Mite protocol this year, but I know up in Canada, you guys, you do want to shut the brood down for a short time, right? In order to be able to treat with the OAV or whatever your technique is. Could you briefly kind of go through your philosophy as far as mites and having, I know that kind of go through your mite philosophy as far as the numbers, keeping them low, what times of the year, and kind of brood cycles and how that plays into that, if you could, for just a minute, please.
Yeah, so he's asking about that. I'm sorry, I'm on my phone. I can hardly see the screen.
Oh, the question is, are you
Don't
not worried?
tell my wife I can't. She'll have to get me glasses.
Says, hey, Ian, are you not worried that you shut down the brood nest before winter bees were made?
Yeah, so this is a double-edged sword. I was talking to Brad Hogg about this a little while ago. He's using formic acid right now, and he's experiencing much the same thing. It's, a little later in the year, it's, compromising some of that late winter nest. And we want as many young bees in our nest as possible, because we have a long winter. We have 4 or 5 months these bees have to get until spring. So we want as many of the young bees in there as possible. But when you have brood lingering within the full-time nest, it just provides a place for these mites to hide. And if we have counts, like 2% is my threshold here for mites. If I have over 2% lights out, they're gone. The colony will not survive. So we need to be able to bring those mite counts down to, like, I'm almost looking at 0.5 shakes. Put them in the shed. Otherwise, I'm really worried about it. That's why I was worried about a 5% shake earlier, and I ran into the yard at 10%. It was freaking out there. That's why I went into this thymol treatment to knock them down. And now I'm shaking zeros. I'm shaking 0.3s, 0.5s. I'm quite comfortable where I am right now. Depends how much damage has been done already, but we're going into winter in low numbers. So if we have like this lingering little brood nest at the end of September into October, those mites, they're hiding in there. And they're going to end up in that winter nest, in the winter shed, all the way through winter, and they're going to compromise that nest. So, you got to draw that line. Where are you going to drop that pin? And mine's middle September. I want the bees to build that winter nest end of August into September. Great big winter nest. There it is. All that lingering brood, just forget about it. Just sacrifice that, so then we can get the next step in to control the mites. And that's basically my treatment plan this fall, was to establish that spectacular winter nest. These colonies look great. It's had mites on them, so I used that thymol, and it's kind of worked the way I wanted it to. Just ended that brood nest. Now we're going to follow up with a little bit of oxalic acid to clean up or kind of mop up the rest of them in there. So that's basically how my train of thought goes towards that.
what kind of washes do you generally have coming out of winter? Out of those, when they've been in the shed for 4 or 5 months, is it typically pretty low? I know that's the goal. That's why you're doing all this, but does it usually work out pretty well? Because the mites, they don't have much brood in the winter nest, do they? Do they pretty much keep the brood at bay, or do they have some brood in the shed?
Yeah, they do have a little bit, but not what you would think is a brood nest. It's kind of like a shotgun pattern. Maybe when I open up a colony in the shed, it's maybe 2 or 3 frames, just speckled brood, and about the size of a grapefruit. So there's always just a little bit of brooding going on in there. So I wouldn't say there's a lot of mite growth. The counts that I'm seeing out of the shed typically mirror the counts going into the shed. So if I go into the shed with 5% and somehow they make it through winter, they come into the shed at 5%. If I put them in 0.5 or put them in washing 0.3s or whatever, that's typically what I find in the spring is about the same. So then, then the spring treatments have to start, because those residing mites is going to be next fall's problem. So then we start the spring treatments, and then hopefully we keep them low, and then get them through. They really do grow through summer, because we have these massive, expansive brood nests all through summer, and then we just try to hammer them down in fall again.
Yeah,
it's a battle. I mean, we're beekeeping. Basically, we're mite managers, is what we are. We go to our bee meetings, and that's all we talk about is mites. We don't talk about bee husbandry. We don't talk about management of honey crop, or we don't talk about equipment. We talk about mites. I'm getting sick and tired of mites. But if we don't control these mites, lights out, we're out of business. So it's our main focus right now is how do we control these mites? Because if we can control the mites, then we can make money at the business, right? So I'm sure you experience the same thing.
Oh yeah. Down here in the South, our season is much longer. We never shut brood down completely. And so it's a continuous battle, trying all kinds of stuff. And I don't know. I just washed a few days ago and ended up with some of my colonies have 0 to 1 mite, and then there were a few that were up at the 22 in the wash, which is that's a 7%, 8%. So what do you do?
Bruce, what would you do with a colony like that then?
I ordered a bunch of Apigard. So I'm going to try that. I know it's, I don't know. I get nervous about treatments that shut down the brood any time of the year. Really, I just do. I know up there you guys deal with that every year when it gets cold. I'm know, Greg, your bees brood way back as well, and Brian, but man, down here, like many times in the middle of the winter, you'll open up a double deep full of bees. It never gets cold enough, long enough to really shut them down. Some of the varieties of bees, the breeds of bees, like the Carniolans, Caucasians, they do shut down some, but most of them have some brood. Even those have some brood all through the winter time. And so you just got to kind of.
What would happen if you did an Apivard, or not you call it Apigard, right?
Apigard, yes, sir.
Yeah, gel.
That thymol treatment. If you did apply that this time of year and it did shut your nest down, let's say for 3 weeks, what would that do to your nest down there?
Well, it'll slow it way down. I haven't used it a lot. My treatments of choice have been Apivar and OAV. Just hit them all the time with OAV all winter long. That's been my treatments of choice in the past. I tried Formic and had some decent results. It didn't seem to. Now it did. I think it did cause the bees to supersede a few queens, but it didn't annihilate mine too bad. And then I've tried with the temperatures correct, of course. And I've tried Apigard once as well, and I'm gonna try it again. But here honestly, you can feed them. Start feeding them. You feed them like crazy, and they'll build that brood back up, even going into wintertime. As a matter of fact, a lot of the local people here, they really try to build their bees up to go to almonds in January. And so when do you have to do that? In December. You got to be feeding them all winter long. And so it's kind of like, it's not at all like they shut down like they do up north. I mean, we never have more than 2 or 3 days below freezing, and most of the time it gets above freezing in the daytime here. You have some night times where it gets down in the teens and 20s, maybe a couple of nights a year, but we're never more than 3 or 4 days away from a Fahrenheit 50-degree day, 60-degree day here. Usually we're within a week, we'll be in a bees flying type temperatures. So
there's that old saying that if the bees are flying, they're dying. So I guess that's why
you got to feed.
So if you shut down your nest, let's say for 3 weeks, maybe even a month, let's say you get crazy about it, you wanted to hammer those bees down, so you just ended that nest. Do you think those bees would, bridge? And do you think they would, in a sense, regroup and keep going? Like for me, my winter nests are set. These bees are going to be there. They're month-old bees. They're there. I just have to protect them by dropping the mites, and I have to preserve them. But for you, like your bees are flying all the time, so they're wearing themselves out. You need that.
They are.
Time.
They are, but they don't fly as much, then, because there are some colder days when they don't fly. So I don't know exactly how they do it. Like, I don't think that down here we have necessarily winter bees that live for 4 or 5 months. I don't think that happens. Maybe that does with a few of them, because we even have drones during part of the year down, or during the wintertime, we'll see a drone here or there. So it never shuts completely down, but it does slow way down. So I really don't know exactly. And Greg's bees up there, he's got those Caucasian bees, and Carniolas have had some of those, and they do slow it way down, but anyway, you're just never going to figure it completely out. And it is really different down here from what you guys, all three of you guys, have up north. Greg, from your experience with dealing with obviously your Caucasian bees, and Brian, you as well, maybe. And I know, Greg, you've dealt with people like Bob, and you've dealt with a lot of beekeepers down here in the South. What has been your experience with this type of thing as far as mite treatments going through winter and things like that?
I'm with Ian that you almost get so sick and tired of talking about bees being sick and tired that you just wonder, when are we ever going to get past this? And it goes back to the old farming thing where it's like, well, if we can just get past this, it'll get easier. If we just can get past, and you find yourself in this constant loop where it seems like it never gets any easier. The only thing that gets easier is you convincing yourself it's going to get easier. But where we're at, Brian's, is we're kind of in this weird spot tucked between what Bruce experiences and it sounds like what Ian experiences. We have so many customers that have waited until now to treat for mites, and they ask me, what do we do? And I say, well, at this point in the season, if you're really just now focusing on mites, you've got two options. If you can not treat them and not sacrifice the winter brood nest, and you are likely going to go into the wintertime with a good sized brood nest temporarily, but the chances of them having a viral load is great. It's a huge risk. Or you go ahead and put a treatment on to knock back all the mites, but you're going to sacrifice the entire brood nest for 3 weeks. In Ohio, you can't. If you did that right now, you would be done. The weather is so challenging for us. When we get into late August, when we have a nice cool window of low 80s Fahrenheit, when we have that, that's the time to throw something for us like Formicon. 14 days, the queens are at about that 14 to 16 days. She's picking back up again, and then she's cruising into mid to late September, October with this enhanced vigor that they start building back up. And now they've got almost 2 brood cycles of those later bees. And that is about the bare minimum of what we need for them to be what we want them. If we just let them cruise, however, ours are more on the frugal side. So the Caucasian influence takes over and they start to really brood down. When it starts to get cool outside and you're a lot of heavy dew on the ground late at night, the leaves start to turn, they start to really shut things down. And it's a balance that I don't know that anyone's quite figured out. But if you wait too long to do your late summer treatment for mites, you're sacrificing your winter brood nest. And if you wait too long, you might have the brood nest, but you're going to have a brood nest that's full of sick bees. And so finding what we really would like to have is bees that have viral resistance, and they can withstand a lot more of this, where mite counts don't matter so much. It's what are the viral counts within the mite populations that are contributing to this. But something that's in between, that is an organic component that doesn't sacrifice the brood nests. For a lot of us, there's a need for that somewhere right in between. And so there's not quite a picture perfect product other than trying to get them late August to knock the mites back, and then using something like OA for cleanup, which is really, it sounds like what Ian's doing.
Yeah. Well, that all makes sense. And I'm still trying to figure it out. For years I was on initially I had no clue. Then I was quote unquote treatment free. then I started just treating with oxalic acid vapor a couple times a year, thinking that was doing something. And then I actually started really probably around the time we got involved with Cayman's conference and with you guys, and just kind of got more into this mode of stream team YouTube stuff, is when I really started getting serious about testing. And I still don't test probably as much as I should, but that has been eye opening for me. That certain times of the year when I thought everything was hunky dory, I realized that maybe it wasn't. Even this past year, I got involved in splitting in February, and next thing I know, I'm stacking supers, and I didn't test as well as I should have, like in January, February timeframe. But I was treating like crazy with OAV, even though there was some brood in the nest. I was treating like every week for like 4 or 5 weeks in a row, taking a couple of weeks off and doing that again. So I thought, well, the mites have got to be under control. Excuse me. The bees look great, and they did well. But then, Ian, I think you saw the video where Auburn came down and did that study with my bees. They're doing a study on the effectiveness, the word is efficacy of Apivar, Amitraz treatments. And when they did the testing, it was right before we harvested honey. They were infested, honestly. Some of them were really bad. And so I went ahead as we pulled honey and put Apivar strips in there. They knocked it way back. But some of those colonies, I've actually lost a couple of those colonies that were so far gone. Even the one that had 52 mites in it, I think, they were down to just maybe 4 or 5 mites after the treatment. But that hive has fizzled out. I think I replaced that queen, and now I think they're starting to bounce back. But one of them just fizzled out, and they were just kind of, I think, sick. And I had no idea they were in that kind of shape because I had not tested in the spring. And it's tough, though, because the honey is on there. You can't do a lot with honey on there. Just like you said, Ian, you kind of just try and get to the end of the honey flow, and then you start trying to treat, and it's just a constant battle. But anyway, I know there are some more questions. Brian or Greg, did you guys have any more questions or comments on that before we move on? I know there's a lot of, we've already spent some time, and we got a few questions in here.
I want to ask Greg a question. You're in massive, severe drought, right?
Well, we were tremendous drought, and we've finally come back out of it, and the pastures are greening back up again.
Oh, good. Do you have some nectar flow or pollen flow to help you out?
No, we totally got destroyed. Goldenrod is our main flow, and the goldenrod, as you guys all know, has the reproductive wherewithal to at least produce pollen even during those times of drought, which it did, and it did in abundance, but it didn't have the rain 30 days prior to bloom, so the nectaries were just they wasn't happening. So goldenrod was a complete bust for us. We started to smell a little bit of that, what folks would think is a goldenrod nectar. That was the asters coming on there at the very end as the third variety of goldenrod came on. So there was nothing. We got a little bit of chicory, a little bit of ironweed, a little bit of aster, but none of the wonderfully nutritious nectar that was were coming in. So we've been feeding, just biblical proportions of feed have been going on, where these colonies have gotten probably about 5 to 6 gallons since probably the end of July, to just keep their queens stimulating, because a lot of these were colonies that we had split down, and we needed growth during this fall. So no nectar to speak of.
Did the nest maintain its development, or did you find that the nest was suffering nutrition-wise?
Well, it's the silver lining, and I'm glad you asked that. The silver lining, I think, was the genetics that we have, because the heavy Caucasian carnies, they brooded down enough to subsist without going too small to get into like demise or to be too vulnerable to excessive robbing. They just stayed there and cruise. And what they would do is they would maintain and just really small gains. You know better than any of us. When that cow loses condition, it seems like it takes 3 or 4 times longer to get her back up to weight as she did to lose it. These bees are kind of like the same thing. We've been putting so much feed on there. We're not seeing gains, but the more importantly, we're not seeing losses. So that's kind of where we're at.
If your nest would be about 2/3 normal size now going into winter, or what typical?
Yeah. What I don't really like is 10, story and a halves here where we're at, and so if we have 7 good frames of bees, it's typically plenty.
Oh yeah, that's really refreshing to hear you talk like that. because we went through a massive drought in 2021. Much the same with what you guys are going through right now. It was terrible. The farm just about didn't make it through it. It's just one of those years. You just work to get to the next year is basically what we were doing.
Yeah.
And I was just like you, as focusing on my brood nest. Like I said, screw to the honey crop. I'm just trying to keep these bees going to get me into the next year, and I did. And I put feed into them, and I put time into them, and I treated. And I got them through winter in spectacular shape, right? But I was talking to other beekeepers through that same period of time, through that drought, and they weren't. It was like they weren't paying attention. Like there was pollen coming in, but not enough. There wasn't enough development going on with them in the nest, and they weren't seeing that, and they weren't responding to it. Massive losses next spring, right across the area, right? So as beekeepers, I think sometimes we are just too nonchalant about the environment providing what it needs for our bees to get them through these tough times, and we have to spend more time responding to these conditions and making sure they have what they need. I'm a big believer in nutrition. I put a lot of thought and I put a lot of product into my supplements I feed them. And I do it for a reason. I do it for that, just to keep them healthy, keep them vigorous, and keep them moving forward. I have a lot of grain land around here. So it was almost like we've run into a massive drought every fall because, the crop's taken off and there's nothing left, not even the ditches. They mow the ditches, they spray the ditches. So we go into this massive dearth. So then I have to bridge when they finish off that natural brood nest end of July into August. And I have to kind of push that brood nest as far out in August and September as I can. And I can't do that naturally. I have to do that with nutrition and such. So so it's so very important. I was thinking about you the other day where I was looking at the map of the United States through this weather map and extreme dryness in your area. And I bet you next spring your beekeepers in that area are going to see massive losses just because they weren't keeping ahead with the requirements needed in those nests.
That's a hard thing for folks to figure out. If you have goats or cows, or if you have livestock, you're used to looking out at them and getting a read for them, getting an idea of where they're at. You see that, but folks who maybe haven't had that experience, it's a lot harder for them to crack a lid and look down quickly and make a quick assessment or read the frames, let alone be fortune tellers and be able to read the future, read where you're at, and know what that looks like. I think it takes many years of building that muscle memory mentally and having that. But then you have weird banner years where the first part of this year it was so phenomenal. It was actually so good that we even sat here on the stream team and I said, just a fair warning, we can't have it this good on the front end of the season and not pay for it at the end of the season. You sometimes wish you never say things like that, because here we are, just complete devastation like no one's ever seen. We're in D4, which is the highest level of drought that we haven't seen in our state's recorded history ever. And then now they were bumped. Then you be careful what you pray for. You pray for rain as the farmer, then the good Lord provides, and we're drowning in it. And then the rest of the country is too. But that's a real challenge, learning to read the livestock and making those calls, knowing everything that you're looking at now, the result you're going to see 30 to 45 days later. That's tough for a lot of folks to get into and see.
I just need to make a caveat to what I just said there. I sounded like I was maybe boasting a little bit. I got through that winter, from that drought, got through the winter, bees in terrific shape. I had a record honey crop, actually. Everybody else was destroyed. It was really sad. But I might have puffed my chest out a little bit too much, because the following spring I had one of the worst winter losses I've ever experienced. So, this great beekeeper sitting here, I had a heck of a time that following year. I fell behind on, the conditions and sickness. And I was I think I was too confident that I was able to manage that tough condition before with nutrition. And nutrition is going to be the answer to everything. So, focusing on nutrition. But I overlooked the disease situation of my bees. And nutrition can help the bees handle disease, but it's not a treatment for disease. It's not a cure for disease. We have to be able to manage the disease on its own. And I wasn't in the right mindset. I was too bold, maybe. And I wasn't quick enough on getting some medication down into the guts of my bees, because they had a severe nosema infection, and it just floored me. absolutely floored me until I finally caught up to it, treated them, not cured, but helped the bees manage the nosema infection. And then with my nutrition, they were able to take that next step to get out of that glut. But anyway, I just wanted to say that, for every there's a flip side to everything, and we have to watch in this business that we don't get too bold and too pompous with ourselves, because she'll throw that switch just like that and humble us within a second.
Hey,
absolutely.
Ain't that the truth? I mean, you go in these forums, these different beekeeping groups and forums, and I celebrate anyone just having success, but about the time anyone says they've got it all figured out, they're just kind of setting themselves up for a hard fall. I know I've had that issue happen to me many times just in the past. I've only been doing this 11 years, and there's so many ups and downs, Greg, you guys both mentioned, and we had a really good year too here up until it did get a little bit dry in August, but then I had those mites. And so, I'm still trying to figure out the stuff that it seems like you guys all have figured out. I still don't know. It is a little different down here, but I'll tell you what, my friend, Tyler Walker, he's a commercial guy, young guy here locally. And the guy just feeds. And now his main business is making bees. He sells a lot of nukes. He's really grown his thing. He's only been keeping bees since 2018. I think he just turned 30 or 31. And now he's doing bees full time. He's got about 1,500 to 2,000 colonies, I think, something like that. But he sells bunches of nukes, but he is always feeding, treating, splitting, just always in his bees, and they just look healthy, but he's doing it the right way. And sometimes I think us either hobbyists, sideliners, it's easy to kind of let things go and say, oh, they feel heavy, they're good, and that's kind of worked for me in the past, but then I do always lose some that I might not have lost if I was more vigilant. But I do have a kind of a test yard this year, the Applin Farms yard where Auburn came into that study. I recently made some kind of late season splits. When was it? Oh, probably about 6 weeks ago now, maybe. Small splits, but I've been feeding them like crazy. And that is going to kind of be my yard where I really try to focus on doing everything, feeding like crazy, I've got to manage all my bees, but I really want to kind of use that almost as a test. And I want to try to kind of pattern it after how Tyler's doing it, because he's got something going on down there. So I need to, if I can just listen to someone locally who's doing it commercially successfully and imitate that, then maybe I'll be okay. I think that goes for you guys too. I mean, I listen to what Greg says, you, Ian. There are a lot of principles that apply to beekeeping everywhere, but I think it's also important for people in the chat to look at what the successful guys are doing locally as well, because the everything's different everywhere. The climate's different. And just here tonight, we've already talked about when you were having a floods, you were having droughts and vice versa. And we were dry down here and wet up there. And, it's just kind of crazy how much variation there is. I've seen Bracken in here, Glade in here from Utah. I've seen DC in here from, I think he's over Washington State. And we got people in here from all over the country, folks from Ohio and just all over the country. And probably I know Brad's in here from up in Canada as well. So probably we even had someone in from New Zealand earlier, I think, that checked in. So just need to make sure we understand the locality of things and how important that is.
One thing you just mentioned about feeding and emulating your neighbor, because he seems to be feeding all the time. I do too. I do a lot of feeding, but I only feed when I need to feed, because this stuff's expensive, right? And we're trying to make money. This is our livelihoods. So, we'll use last fall as an example. I fed probably 5 pounds of supplement into them, and I just poured the liquid in. I spent a lot of money on them because I needed it. This fall, we had a late flow going into September even, and I'm looking at my nest. I'm like, they have what they need. It's coming in. The nests are building, they're maintaining, they're developing. So I pulled back on the supplement almost completely. I still gave them 2 pounds of supplement patty for it to have it, one of those feel good things. So they probably didn't even need that, because they were able to manage themselves with what was available, except for the sugar. I had to pour the sugar to them because they need that to get them through winter. But I mean, like developing out that winter nest, they had the nectar coming in, they had the pollen. So I pulled back and I saved that money. Actually, I have some Ultra Bee with Andrew's product, that Apis Biologics in there, had it mixed in there. And I bought it to use this fall. I seen they didn't need it, so I was like, so it's in the shed still. I'm going to use it next spring, right? So you kind of got to the guys will watch me feed a whole bunch. They'll put all these additives and they'll do the same thing. But I always try to get across that you want to do something for a purpose. You're putting something into that colony to be able to achieve something. So when you put it in there, you better start measuring to see if it actually works. Because if it's not working, then it's just a feel-good activity. Or they're getting the stuff in from the natural sources, right? You put it in there and they respond to it. That means there's a deficit, and you better be on top of the ball to continue that on. So the feeding is it's the art of beekeeping. I think it just adds one more layer to trying to manage our environment and manage the number of bees we have within our specific area. And my area is just grain land, so I have to manage a lot differently than maybe. I'm not sure what your region is like, Greg or Bruce, or actually not Brian. Yours probably much the same as Greg's area. Lots of agriculture. Yeah.
We have a lot of farming, a lot of row cropping, but we also have a lot of woodlands and trees and like we have the cotton we have, which they do, depending on I think the conditions, they'll bring some in from cotton, but we have the privet and the tallow in the spring. We have just a little bit of everything. We have a lot of swamplands, wetlands around, and it's really actually a really good area, I think, for bees health wise, but we do have a tremendous dearth that occurs if you're not anywhere close to cotton, and cotton doesn't always produce either. I think it depends on the variety of cotton in the soil. So it doesn't always produce either. Even in a good year, it may not produce very well, depending on there's so many variables,
You'd be able to time your supplement, like a protein patty that time. If you have that dearth, slap her on there.
Yeah, we really, honestly, down here, we have pollen coming in almost year round. Even when there's an apparent dearth of nectar, there's almost always pollen coming in. And I'm really hesitant with the pollen patties in the summertime because of the hive beetles.
Oh, of course.
Beetles just are they will annihilate hives. And some people do that, but I have never used a lot of pollen patties. I did some this past spring to try it out, but man, there is almost very rarely do you go out and look in the bee yard and there's not bees coming in with some type of pollen on their legs. It's just, I don't know where they get, even in the middle of the winter time, I'm like, where are they getting this stuff? But you'll go out there in December and they'll have this, I think henbit is a weed down here that grows, and it's like a red pollen, and that grows in the winter time. We have the yellow mustard that grows, and they're bringing in pollen almost all year round if you have them in areas where those particular things are. We have a few questions in here, and Ian, I don't know how long you can stay on tonight. You're welcome to stay on as long as you want, but
I'll give you another 15 minutes. How does that sound?
Okay, well, we got a cruise because we got 13 questions and we've addressed one or two. So.
But you know me, I'm a beekeeper. I'll be here for another hour.
Yeah. So, listen, you're welcome to stay as long as you want.
Actually, I was thinking when I was driving here from the tractor, I was listening to you, and you said something. You said you've been on for 3 years now, right?
Yeah, we started this around Christmas time 3 years ago. Yes, sir.
So that means 4 years ago, I was with Brian on your chat. You, me, and this Chris guy from South Dakota or someplace. Yeah. Time flies.
Chad.
It really does. It's hard to believe we've been doing this so long, and we haven't missed. We've missed probably in 3 years. We might have missed 8 or 10 Wednesday nights, maybe. I don't even know if we've missed that. We may have missed that many with holidays and things considering things that come up. But it's been very, very few.
I can tell.
It's fun. Yeah, it is. It's fun, and hopefully people will stick with us for a while. I'm going to rapid fire some questions here at you. Either Greg or Brian, you guys chime into if you need to, if you want to. How was the sunflower crop / harvest?
Excellent. Sunflower crop this year was spectacular. It held us for another 2 weeks at the end of the canola flow. More than happy. Actually, I should go into the field now and take a video. That sunflower, it just, you never know what's ahead of you, right? We grew the sunflowers, we planted them, and we got pounded by hail, so it thinned them out. Then they grew up to about, almost a foot. We had this massive windstorm come down, and the land blew, and it sandblasted the plants down to little nubs like this. And I was like, my goodness, is this a write-off what we're going to do? But right on the very top was just a little green spot. The growth point was still there. So we left it, and we come back the next week, started to flower out, or leaf out, and it grew, and we just had almost a textbook growing condition summer this year. Lots of heat and just enough rain all the way through. And they grew taller than I could stand. Great big heads. I walk in there as this flowering. There's 2 or 3 bees making the circle, just pulling the nectar off it. And they pollinated. the great big heads on them like this, and they're pointing right down to the ground, and they're like this, and they're ready for harvest. They're dry right now. As soon as we get out of the corn, we took some wind damage in the corn, 10% damage in the corn, so we're getting as hard as we can. We're picking it up. We don't want to get any more damage, so we're going to move to the sunflowers. And sunflowers in that windstorm, the heads are so big they weren't moving much, so they're going like this. But anytime they touch another head, they shell, right? So the drier they get, it doesn't take as much. So if we get another windstorm, we're going to take a lot of loss. So we're working as hard as we can to get into there. We made a lot of honey on them, and we're going to make fingers crossed, if we can get it in the bin, it's going to be a good crop.
Do you harvest? Do you use a combine to harvest those? What do you use to harvest them? Combines?
Yeah,
How do you harvest
them? That combine. Yeah.
Okay. Next question. This is an important question for all of us. Ian, how do you find time to decompress and relax?
By doing this.
Double
like I would be on a tractor right now if I wasn't pulled here to talk bees. So it's my this farm is a curse. Like, I love it. I'm a farmer right to the bone, but I can't get away from it. And with family, everybody talks about workplace family balance. It's BS. There's no such thing. That's why farmers call this a lifestyle, because farm always comes first, it seems. And then when you have time, you direct it towards a family. I don't have a hobby other than fishing. I don't get out fishing as much as I'd like to. So I like making these little videos, and this YouTube project of mine is my way to decompress. In the morning, I do everything on my phone, video on my phone. I have all these little video files, edit with my thumb. I have a little video editor, put it on, upload it, gets my mind off the job before I start the job. And then the best thing I like about the YouTube is interaction with the beekeepers. I read all the comments because I love chit-chatting. I love arguing with guys too. Some guys will be a little snarky, so I'll send a comment back to them, and then we'll have this big long exchange. But I find that refreshing in a lot of ways, because it gets my mind off the farm, but I'm still on the farm. And then stuff like this, I just love doing stuff like this. So I appreciate you guys inviting me on here.
Absolutely. That's good stuff. Next question. This is Bracken Barker. He actually came and helped me harvest this summer. Bracken came down from Utah.
Yeah.
Great young guy, young beekeeper. Him and his dad run about 100-acre farm. It's kind of interesting. He's starting to do, he really actually, I think, really appreciates what you do and wants to kind of do what you're doing with his YouTube channel. He's got a similar type thing. Now he's running, I think he's a sideliner beekeeper, about 40 or 50 colonies now, but he's got 100 acres. They raise a lot of alfalfa and things like that. I'm not sure what all they do, but this is a really good question from Bracken to you. And just know Bracken looks up to you a lot. He says, Ian, how do you run bees and the farm with the different chemicals you got to use on the farm?
Yeah, first I'll say Bracken sent me a hat. His
awesome
logo on there. My youngest daughter, is wearing it in the bee yards, and I was like, "You're wearing the competition's hat. What are you doing?"
Yeah, he would love nothing more than to have the type of effect you're having, but he just appreciates what you're doing. We all do. We all appreciate what you're doing. But so how do you manage the chemicals and the bees at the same time?
He sent me a message over email a week and a half ago or so. I never did answer back to him, because I want to respond to him, but I don't have the time right now to be able to respond to it. So then he said, make a video, and I was going to make a video on this. I kind of have years past, but I haven't had time to make a video on this either. And it kind of follows a lot of the, I think in the email he sent me, he said he had trouble because in his video or on Facebook or someplace he was spraying Roundup or something, or he was controlling a weed, and he was getting negative feedback from somebody, some troll or somebody. Oh, you shouldn't be spraying. It's bad for your bees. You're a beekeeper. How dare you? One of those kind of comments. So then he reached out to me and asked, so how do you deal with it? Because you have a 4,000 acre grain farm and you have 1,500 colonies. And how do you handle, first off, the feedback from the people on the internet, all the armchair environmentalists, quarterbacks, just all that, and how do you just do it within the farm itself? Like, how do you manage those chemicals and the bees all at the same time? And it's not an easy, there's no easy answer to that. We always talk about balance, right? You got to find that balance, but there's no such thing as balance in a grain farm, because the grain farm always comes first, every time. It doesn't matter. And when you look at the books, the bees always take a second seat. So if there's flea beetles in the canola, we're spraying for the flea beetles. You better get the bees out of the way. If there's diamondback, or if there's armyworm in the canola, well, either you move the bees or you're going to take a hit, because we're spraying that canola. We got to protect that crop. If we don't protect the crop, we're out of business. That's all there is to it. So I have to find a way as a beekeeper to work around the grain farm, because that's just the way it is, right? Even if these seed treatments, everybody's complaining about corn seed treatment and canola seed treatment killing the bees. Well, I'm buying it too as a farmer, and I'm a beekeeper. Is it hurting my bees? Is it not? That's a tough one. I just can't use these seed treatments because we use them for a purpose, right? So basically, all I can say is we have to. I kind of, because it's my farm too, so I'm a thorn in the side of my brother. I'm always there reminding him, we got bees, right? So if you're going to spray for flea beetles, just leave a little bit of a buffer zone around my bee yard, or give me at least a day or two so it can move my bees away. Or maybe I shouldn't even have my bees in that field at the time when the pests are probably going to be sprayed. So there's things like that. When we're looking at grasshopper infestation in the pastures, or in the crops, or the armyworms, or just crop-related bugs during bloom, what we do is we try to, if we can't move the bees away, because a lot of time the colonies are stacked up, they're pulling honey, we'll maybe choose a pesticide that's more pollinator safe, right? So there's products out there that we can use that won't outright kill the colonies. I'm not sure if there's, effects further down the line. I've never seen any, but we'll try to use products that are less harmful to the bees. Or we'll spray during times when the bees aren't in the fields. If we're spraying for flea beetle, let's say, we try not to do it first thing in the morning or even through the day. We try to do it in the evening, almost into night. We will work late, just not only to help protect my bees, but also to get more bang out of our buck with our product. If we put our product on in the morning or during the daylight hours, it'll burn off and decompose, and we won't get a lot of insect kills. So we try to do it later in the day, so we have that activation period all the way through the night, and it helps manage the bugs a little bit more effectively. So just little things like that. We're just trying to be mindful of the fact that the bees are there. So just do those few extra steps to help avoid the consequence of using these products. We'll use herbicide and fungicide and the whole bit, but it's just the way it is, right?
Yeah,
it's the way agriculture has developed over the last 100 years. And if we're going to change away from the system of managing our lands, managing our crops, managing our food supply source, then we have to evolve into something else, and that's going to take technology. I think technology is going to be our answer to everything. As we get, we're pointed in different directions, and we try to find solutions in those different directions, but it all takes time. And so if it took 80 years to get where we are now, it's going to take maybe another 40 to get out of where we are into somewhere else, right? So we just have to make sure we could keep pushing the bus the way we want it to go, and just work with it. That's all we can do.
Yeah, there's a question.
Getting back from these armchair quarterback environmentalist type.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy for them to say, right? It's so easy. They can sit here and say, "Oh, don't use that product. You're a beekeeper. How dare you?" Well, then what would you do otherwise? There's a problem. There's a reason that product's being used. So if we're not going to use that product, then how are we going to solve that problem that we're trying to manage, right? And there's never an answer for that. And that bothers me more than anything else. They never give you an answer. Quit using that seed treatment. Quit using that pesticide. Quit using the fertilizers. Quit managing the land yard. Quit draining, all these, quit doing without an actual answer to it on the other side of it. It's just a hollow comment, and there's nothing to it. So all you got to do is just hold to your guns and make sure that what you're doing is actually doing what you want to achieve, and then find if there's going to be any consequence, and then you're going to have to manage that consequence, and then live with yourself, live with that decision you made. So I hope that answered the question.
I love the comment. I would never buy honey from your hives. I'm like, okay, whatever.
Well,
Greg,
they can raise their own colonies then, right? Make their own honey.
Greg, do you have any input on that? Any input as far as how you manage chemicals on the farm?
There is, perfect is the enemy of good is a way to look at it. But I think there is no such thing as balance. There is only accepted compromise, period. And you have to figure out what is cash flowing the business. That's where the effort goes. And you've got the levels that tier down from there. Obviously, we want to keep things as holistically and environmentally minded as possible. But at the end of the day, if corn is providing the ability to be there, to have an enterprise as bees, you got to take care of the crop first. But there's ways, like Ian just said, to do it, or you can find little ways to work together. But there is no balance. There is no such thing as balance with a large family, with a farm, with a business, with life. There is just acceptable compromise, and I think Ian spelled it out perfectly.
I mean, I'm not saying that I agree the way the system's set up and the way the system's running. Like, there's a lot of times I'm running my tractor down the field. I'm saying, boy, it'd be nice if we were back in the 1950s where this field would be smaller, and I'd be in a smaller tractor, and there'd be, growth along the hedgerows, or I'd even have hedgerows, and there'd be a little pond over there where we didn't drain it, and we'd have some cows over in that pasture, and we'd have some bees over here collecting all of the diverse floral from the countryside, back in the good old days, right? And that's the way I kind of, and even the machinery we run, it's so complicated. We can't fix this stuff anymore. It's like we're being caught in this loop of we're out of control. We're not in control of what we're doing anymore, and it really bothers me. Like, it really does. I'm caught in that loop the same as everybody else is, and we have to get ourselves out of it. But if we recognize we're in this loop, then we're going to find a way to get out of it, and eventually we're going to do it. But we need help. Like, we have the government's pushing all this bullshit environmental stuff onto us. Excuse my language, I shouldn't say that. But that's what it is. But if the consumers actually give a darn, then they would be supporting the land management practices that they preach. But they're not. They're looking at going to Costco, going to Walmart, and looking at that price tag and buying that food that made in India or made in China instead of buying the stuff from back home here, the way they tell us to make it, right? So there's huge problems, but the consumer has to spend with their dollar the way they want it done properly. And that's all there is to it. If they don't change that spending habit, then we can't change the way we farm, because our cost of production is razor thin, right? So it's just a dynamic. It's a hard one.
Ian, one of the best videos that I saw, it was by one of the tree huggers, and it was this girl that was standing in a grocery store, and she made the comment she didn't understand why people don't just buy their chicken from the grocery store because the chickens there weren't hurt. I'm just like,
you'd hope she's joking.
I mean,
she's not.
She was dead honest, serious, and I was just like, Lord help this country.
That's the problem. Education is people just have no idea. A quick question from Ted Jackson. Ian, will you be going to Nobby this year, the Bee Expo?
Man, I wish it wasn't. The timing's perfectly wrong. It is, right to New Year's. It's a hard time because that's family time. So I haven't said no yet. Cayman already is expecting me not to come, but I might. I don't know. Probably not. If it was a little bit later, even when they had it before, I probably. But
we will see you in Wisconsin, though, I believe. What is that? January 25th? Yeah.
That'll be fun.
2 events lined up in Wisconsin. One Beekeeping meet, and then the other expo. Yeah.
The Beak meet. Question from David Kress. Ian, what the number of colonies do you have? Do you check every colony or random washes? I think for the mites.
Oh boy, no! I have 1,800 colonies.
No way
that I can't do a Randy Oliver and just shake every colony. I'm not insane like he is. I do. I manage my operations on spot checks throughout the year. there's very seldom I'll go through every colony all the time. The only time of the year I'll do that would be in the spring, when we're either equalizing things out or when we're going through the split. So we'll actually get down there, get very intensive, start pulling frames, so that I can really see what's going on every colony that's going through, and we'll sort them through and get them built up, pulled down, whatever has to be done that time. But any other time of the year, it's always to go to the yard and I'm picking 2 or 3 and just see what they're doing, go down, take a look, take some washes, just get a feel for what's going on. Throughout the summer when I get really busy and we're just, box lifters at that time, on the weekends when the crew's not around, I'll go out and I'll just dig down into a few random nests to see what's going on with nectar flow and colony development and all that. So everything's done on a spot check basis.
Greg, that's kind of how you manage it too, or do you pretty much go in everything?
Now, about the same. It seems like when you, just like we talked about, kind of reading your livestock, you sometimes get a sense for the colonies who may be potentially the worst offenders. Kind of keep an eye on those, or sometimes know where those are. So I would, for me, if I've got something in double deeps and 2 supers, those are going to be the ones for me that can get away from you quick. Things that are a little more compact, a little smaller brood nests, are ones that I'm worried about, but I may take a smaller sample of those and dig into the ones with the bigger brood nests, take my samples from that to try to find the worst case. Always get in the habit of trying to look for the worst case scenarios rather than just the ones that make you feel good. Try to find the ones that are going to be the offenders, and then use that as an overall, level metric.
Quick question, and this kind of brings up a point that I'm finding. I don't know if you guys find this too. This, Brian, you probably may feel the same way, but when I go through, say if I have 15 or 20 colonies in a bee yard, if I just check, say 3 or 4 of those colonies, the other day, my example, I mentioned earlier in the video that I washed a couple of colonies this past, a few days ago that had 22 mites. Well, there was just one in each bee yard. One of them, I think, had like 15 colonies in the bee yard. I've lost some colonies there. But I said, I'm going to wash all these. Most of them were fine, but I have one that was 22, one that was 12. So do you notice as you go through your colonies, and Greg, this will be for you, and Brian, if you want to chime in too, do you notice that you may have a very small percentage, like you may have one colony that's a mite bomb, and you may have 10 or 15 that are just fine. Do you run into that, or do your colonies they seem to be pretty consistent across the board?
I'll have that. I'll get one. It always seems like location, though, in my yard dictates which one will end up like that. There's a couple factors that go into that, because if it's a colony that's more prone to drift, if it's a larger colony that just went and robbed out another one that was infested with mites, there's a couple factors that go into that. But I tend to not find, like where my colonies are set up in the rows, I tend to not find the ones in the middle with the higher mites. It's always it's on an end.
Now mine are on pallets, but they seem pretty random, but I don't know. Greg, Ian, do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, there's mite bombs for sure. And probably the way I do it, I miss them, except if I sample enough times, I'm going to eventually find one of those, right? So if I'm like throughout my my survey of the entire round I'm doing, and let's say I survey through 25 colonies, through all my colonies, if I see low count, high count, that's one of the outliers, right? And that's when I know that there's probably a problem. I find if you have mite bombs, or if you have a disease outbreak, kind of like those colonies you're talking about, then you're going to be running into massive problems further down the line. So if I ever find a situation like that, then it's high alert. When I find mite bombs like that, we're doing what we have to with the treatments, because it's,
you just treat them. When you find that, do you just treat them all?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thoughts, Greg?
I might try to treat, like here's an example for this fall. I put Apivar in all my colonies, including my splits. And then later on, I was following up with mite washes to see where I'm at, and I was seeing increasing mite counts. But I was only seeing the increasing mite counts within my my production colonies. all my splits on my nukes, even though they produced me a honey crop in that, even though they were produced from the same bees in the spring as those production colonies, I actually just split those colonies in half. As they grew, I just took the top box away. So exactly the same nest, but this is a split, put the queen cell in there. So they had a 3-week brood break. Those splits, through my sampling, were all very, very, actually, I hardly shook a mite off those colonies. So I was able to determine my production colonies I treated differently than my my splits and my nukes, just because my sampling told me so. So I put it in emergency measures into the production units with the Happy Life R and knock things down, but within the splits, I was more apt to use the Happy tablets, where I was just kind of experimenting with things and such.
Awesome. Greg, thoughts, or you kind of concur with that?
Just, I mean, it kind of goes back to reading your livestock again. We're at a much smaller scale. We max out at around 400 colonies, but even going through the yards, going through the colonies, sometimes you'll get a sense for why is this colony way spicier? Why, you get to understand how your bees typically act, how they look, what their luster is, what their overall production is. You'll come across a colony that doesn't seem right. Those are the ones we kind of earmark and make sure that we're finding out why. A lot of times those are the ones that may have the higher mite pressure, the higher viral issues, but then there's the wild card. And I think we're going to be talking a lot more about this in the near future. I talked with Marla Spivak not too long ago about it, and we don't have time to go down this F2, F3, VSH debauchery as far as our breeding program. But we were also finding when you get into some of these F2s, F3s from some of these line mashups, that we'll all of a sudden have F2 or F3 colonies that will have 30, 40 mites, where everything else on the pallet, they're washing 1%, it's no problem all day. No, they're self-sustaining. But you run into these colonies who are they seem like absolute mite bombs, and they are to a certain extent. But they're chugging along. They're beautiful. They're everything looks right, other than the mite wash. And then sometimes you'll find colonies that have a low mite wash. That what is wrong? Why are the wheels falling off the bus on these colonies? I think this conversation is going to drastically change over the next couple of years, where we're going to be talking about the intensity of the viruses, even in small mite populations, are having a much bigger impact on the health of our bees than we're ready to do anything about. So the name of the game now is eliminate the mites, but we're going to be in the near future having an issue trying to understand the virology with what's being transmitted and how that's actually affecting the bees' health, even at small mite populations. And that's a horse of a different color.
Yeah. This is kind of almost, we got, I think 4 more questions we're going to address. And this one right here may kind of go down that rabbit hole a little bit, what Greg was just talking about. Ian, you have queens from several different sources. Are you seeing differences with mite counts between the different queens?
Well, yes. I'm not just looking for mite counts, though. I'm also looking for other characteristics within these queens I'm bringing in. I don't like to breed from anything that's new as I bring it in. I like to bring a lot of stuff in, bring it all together. I do believe the variety of traits and such, genetics, the bees just thrive. That's what I found. When I started narrowing my stock down, not bringing as much stuff in, I thought maybe my stock was getting a little flat, until I started bringing a whole bunch of stuff in. Then all of a sudden I started seeing sparks again. So it's just what I do. I bring a lot of stuff in, and I just breed from the stuff that, prospers within my operation. And one of those selection criteria will be maybe mite tolerance. I don't know. I do have a couple lines in right now. I have Randy Oliver stock in from Ray Oliveras, and Ray also sent me some VSH stock just to try out to see how the honey production was on them. Not so much the mite tolerance, but just sending me the stock to see how they perform in heavy honey type situations. And that's very important for a guy like me, because honey is my livelihood. We don't have pollination opportunities or anything. So if it doesn't make honey, then the bees aren't really any good to me. They still have to live, and I understand that, but they have to produce honey. I was finding through those queens, I was shaking basically the same mite loads on them as I was with the rest of my stock. But how they would handle those mite loads and viral infections through the winter, I'm not sure. That's just what I'm tracking. So I didn't keep them non-treated. I've brought these queens into my operation, into my management systems, and I'm putting them through the same system as everything else. And they're going to go through winter like everything else. And I want to see how they come through winter like everything else. So that's basically how I'm tracking.
When you got your
Yeah.
VSH, were they mated or were they virgins? They were mated.
Yeah, and they did very well off the start. We had some super procedures, but I don't like to blame the queen or the breeder on that. I like to blame the transport, from the queen bank to my queen bank or my colony. There's an in between there that sometimes damages the queens. And I find that, well, I tested that actually. All this import stuff that we buy in, we always have this 10% loss or 15% loss. It's just what happens with import stock. So I got mad and I drove out to BC and I bought a bunch of packages and a bunch of queens out in BC. And then I drove them back into Manitoba, babied them the entire way. And I didn't see those losses because I didn't see any of the extreme conditions that the other queens are seeing. So that tells me that I'm not going to fault the VSH queens for the super procedures. I'm faulting the air transport.
Yeah.
I got them established, and then I put them into the honey flow, and I noticed those queens being a little bit slower in the spring. They didn't build up as fast. They didn't produce as much honey, but they look like terrific little nest right now going into winter. So, they got to produce honey if they are going to be any good.
I've said the same thing recently where I hate ordering queens. I hate ordering them through USPS just because they mistreat them, and it's no fault of whoever you're getting them from.
No.
That you can't control that. So anymore, I've got somebody down there that lives just over 2 hours away, and when I need stuff, I pick up the phone or send a text message, set it all up, and I drive down. So, and it's a lot easier picking them up where you can control all the variables.
I'm not sure what mechanism Randy Oliver has in his stock. There might be some VSH, there might be some SMR. I'm not sure what's going on, or mite suppression, whatever that is. I did find those colonies produced a lot of honey, so I was happy with that. And they're gentle, and they're sexy little queens. They're just beautiful little red queens. I just love them. So, yeah.
Well, I think he just breeds from the best, kind of like what Greg's doing now. They're just breeding from the best colonies, and then you end up with a good product. And so I think that's what you suggested as well. Greg, I know you could go on for an hour about this, but you got any comments?
No, I'm not even going to get started, and I'm going to open the cork on that one. But maybe we'll have Ian back on later in the winter and go into queen breeding.
Okay. We just got about 2 or 3 more questions here, guys, and we'll wrap it up.
I am a big believer, though, in bringing diversity into the operation, into the bees. I think you guys were talking about this a while ago, and I do want to touch on this a little bit, Greg. What is your opinion on that? Bringing a lot of bees in together into an operation and having everything mingle together and trying to manage that all together.
Well, it's a tricky, double-edged, loaded question because you get to, is diversity good or is diversity bad? And we would agree that I think diversity is good, but I think unfortunately, too many folks don't know when a line goes flat, or they don't know what it looks like to hit a bottleneck. They automatically assume that we need a bunch of diversity brought in to achieve the grass is greener on the other side. You'll know when the stock goes flat. You'll know when you hit the bottleneck. And it's at that point in time it's my belief that it makes sense to bring in deliberate, specific lines and then bring that in and actually have time to trial and see what they do. This approach is going to be different for every single one of us here, on the screen. But I do believe that if you are working on a breeding program, that bringing in too much diversity can set you back unless you're being extremely intentional and deliberate about out yards and out crosses and separating things, so you can actually take a good look at things. When you're bringing in specific, if you're bringing in specific, let's say boutique lines of, you name the acronym, to me, I want to see what the F2 and the F3 looks like. When I get, and I know what those are looking like with another known cross, now we've got something to start breeding into. But if we start bringing in 18 different acronym of queen lines all at once, all in the same yard, the challenge that I mentally that I have, and what we have seen, and luckily I've gotten past, and it was through bringing in VSH virgins. Thank God those were in an isolated out yard, because that turned into such a negative scenario that if we would have left them in our main mating yards and we would have flooded those areas with drones for 1 or 2 more generations, we would, in my opinion, would have set certain genetic traits into our mix that would have taken us so much longer to breed out of. So I'm a fan of diversity. Our bees are mutts. They tend to lean towards Caucasian and carnies that are frugal. They seem to be keeping mites pinned back on their own, but that's through breeding from the best over and over and over again. And not until we start to see something go flat that we bring in a specific line, bring that to it, see what the F2s, the F3s look like. Now we start moving in that direction rather than bringing in a dozen different lines and you don't know what you're looking at. And now you're chasing F2s of all these different crosses. When you look at what the queen brings to the table, what the drone brings to the table, for the average beekeeper who's keeping a few hundred colonies, who maybe isn't even doing queen breeding, I don't know that they need much diversity. There is already so much diversity built into so many of these lines, especially here in the U.S. I don't know how necessary that it is. And I could go on and on about what we do about that and why I think that, but that's my opinion. Sometimes too much of a good thing is a net negative.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page here. Yeah, they're always breeding. We're bringing the stock, but to breed from that stock, you're testing to make sure it's achieving what you want, and that's typically over 2 or 3 years, is what you're saying. Yeah. That's the same with us. Like, I'll bring a lot of stuff in, but we're not breeding from it. We're trialing, we're observing, like this stuff from Randy Oliver. We're not going to breed from him next year. We're going to see how it performs this next year, and then maybe find some of those mothers the year after, then start dabbling in this VSH stock. We got to see how it performs before we want to introduce that into our operation, because if, like you're saying, if all of a sudden they go flat on honey, that's no good for me. So I have to make sure this
or temperament. And we actually had Randy on not that long ago, and we were talking. He would just exactly what you just said. You know, working on building a more locality adapted bees that are meeting the needs that you have for those bees in your area makes more sense than trying to discover this other magic. You know, a lot of what we all need is already in our backyards. It's fine tuning what's there and seeing where we can take that. That makes a lot more sense and is actually achievable, rather than everyone thinking we have to bring in the next magic trait of this and the acronym. You turn into it's a really tough scenario. So that was a good talk we had with Randy about that.
Yeah, I enjoyed listening to you guys with that, and I agree completely to a certain degree on that. My best bees in my operation right now are the ones that I had Carrie make for me, like our own stock.
Absolutely, 100%.
That's all there is to it. And I bring in this wonderful stock from Italy or whatever coming in. Don't like it. I bring in another stock from this other area. Come in. Maybe I like that one, like that one, like that one. So we watch those ones a little bit, and then we'll pull from them. Like that's how we brought more propolis into our bees, by bringing in some of the Caucasians. But it's just, you know, we're just taking what we like, picking and choosing. But I'm not afraid to bring stuff in and trial it, because I was finding I was getting too closed up, and my bees, like up here, we naturally, like, there's no honeybees up here. We manage bees. That's why they exist up in Canada here. Otherwise, there'd be no bees. So naturally, as I was going and just selecting, the bees are getting so conservative. They're actually killing themselves. So we had to bring in some of the Italian blood just to brood them up a little bit in the fall to get a bigger nest, right? So then I was like, yeah, okay. So I had to compromise a bit. So I had to start bringing in the stock a little bit here and a little bit there, just to keep the the genetics a little
Right.
freer than they're naturally wanting to progress themselves.
All right. A couple more quick questions we have, and this is a real simple yes or no question. I have a question for anyone. Does OA ever go bad? I have an old cup of it in the garage. Oxalic acid, does it ever go bad?
I mean, it's never hangs around long enough to find out. I think some of the glycerin based ones are going to be your biggest problems. The ones that are glycerin based will clump up and get hard and get crispy, but you'll have to just bust it up, get it as smooth as you can. The newer product that's approved here in the U.S. With Superzon, the Easy Ox, that has a really nice consistency. But truth be told, I don't have any OA laying around in containers that don't get used up in a quarter of a year,
It decomposes into formic or CO2 or something like that, isn't it? So, the byproducts, I don't think I'd be afraid to use it.
Yeah.
This kind of goes along with what we were talking about with the bees in Canada maybe not being able to survive on their own. Have you thought about leaving a few colonies outside over winter as a test or a comparison? If you did, would you wrap or insulate?
I used to winter outside. My neighbor actually manages his bees pretty much exactly the way I do. Single boxes, blah, 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 all this stuff. And he wraps his single boxes outside, and he seems to do things all right. I chose to go indoors just to control my conditions a little bit more. We can have some harsh conditions up here, and I just felt it was easier to bring them inside out of that. I just felt I was getting more predictable, consistent results that way.
Yeah, it makes sense with the number of colonies you have that you can keep them in a consistent state. And also, kind of piggyback on that question just a little bit. We were talking about genetics earlier. One of the things that I think I run into with my colonies is a lack of consistency because I have so many different lines. And Greg and I have talked about this quite a bit on this chat and privately on the phone. And I know I drive him crazy, but when you're breeding all different kinds of breeds of bees, you kind of run into the Italians that stay brooded up and the Caucasians and Carniolas that breed down. And so it's just hard to get a consistent product out there. This will be our last question for the night. I know there's probably some more in the chat, but let's go ahead and wrap it up with this question. It says, will more advanced testing for adulterated honey make beekeeping more profitable in the future? That's a good question. I know that there are a lot of issues with adulterated honey in the stores and so forth.
Yeah, I think there's the guys are keeping one step ahead of the tests all the time, and it's frustrating when we seem to have, as we're screening the honey coming in and sending it through the tests, they just seem to circumvent it somehow. It's really frustrating. It's too bad. It
is because if you go to Walmart or you go to I'm not singling out Walmart, but most grocery stores you go to, the price of the honey will be way lower than what I sell mine for. You look on the back and it comes from Brazil or Argentina or Thailand or just wherever, Vietnam. So you're just so China. I don't know if I've ever seen it from China, but it's from all over the world. But it's marketed. The sticker on the label is like from a big honey packet, made in the USA, or it's bottled in the USA or something. And so, but when you look at where the product actually comes from, and then I saw a post not long ago of someone that was in a store, just a local, little grocery store, and it said on the back, the ingredients, high fructose corn syrup and honey, and it was being sold in that jar as honey. So they did have the ingredients listed, but whoever looks at that, if you don't know any better, a lot of people probably don't even look at the back, and I'm sure they got that honey for much cheaper than the real stuff. And so it is very frustrating, but obviously I think if they could control that, if they could control the honey coming in, the adulteration of it, obviously that could help us local beekeepers out tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a free market guy, so I have no problem with competing against other honey products as long as it's honey. The key word is adulterated there, and we can't compete against the adulterated product. So if the consumers want an adulterated product, then they're just going to close their eyes like this as they buy the honey off the shelf because they don't know where it comes from. My honey goes to Bee Made Honey, and that's a Canadian beekeeper-owned packer. And we pack 25 million pounds of honey every year, and we supply the honey right across Western Canada, pretty much right across Canada, into overseas, Japan, Caribbean, it's just all over the world we're selling our honey, except for in the States. You guys, even though our exchange is in our favor, your price point down in the States is really hard to compete against because, I mean, it's pretty hard business here. There's not a lot of profits down there.
Yeah, well, we know.
So it might be
I
because
think
offshore honey coming in.
I think we're just bringing it in from all over the rest of the world and, screwing the local guys over. I mean, I know, I think they're paying it's like $2.35 a pound for, it's less than $3 a pound. I know for bulk honey, like these big packers or big producers, like big commercial guys, it's hard to make money at that. I mean, if you're running an operation, but
we're holding our space on the shelf right now because we can guarantee our authentic nature of our honey was 100% Canadian honey. We don't blend it off with any other honey coming in. So we market it as this product of a Canadian beekeeper, and it's a guaranteed authenticity, that honey. And I feel good as a beekeeper knowing that my hard work is being handed off to my packer, which is then treating that honey with the respect that it deserves and putting it on the shelf and representing it the way I would if I was putting it on the shelf myself. So, and one of the reasons why we're able to compete is because we can provide that authentic 100%. This is real Canadian honey, and like you say, Walmart or Costco or other big chains like that. Just because it's in a big supermarket chain doesn't mean it's crap honey. There's a lot of honey.
That is true.
That is authentic, and our honey product is getting onto that shelf and holding itself there just because. They know that there's not going to be a recall coming down the line because of some adulterated product in there. It's not supposed to be. The consumers, they want that honey. They ask for it. They pay for it. So I think maybe looking down the line, it's going to have to be a consumer-driven type direction. If the consumer wants the cheapest honey, then I guess that's where you guys are headed down there in the States, where it's just hard to compete there as a beekeeper on the shelf. But if the consumer wants an authentic product, they're going to take that extra step to make sure that that product or that food that they're buying is an actual, honey or is actual olive oil or actually whatever it's supposed to be. Otherwise, it's food fraud.
I have one last question for you, Ian, and I know you do a lot of canola honey. Is that honey marketed in the stores for consumption, or is it? I mean, I know it crystallizes very quickly. Do people? How does that work when the honey crystallizes quickly like that? How do they manage that?
Oh yeah, it's premium. We sell a lot of that in Japan. They can't get enough.
I love it. Okay, good.
Yeah. When we have to extract it quickly because it hardens, but we have like a month to get it out of the comb and into the barrel. In the barrel, they'll warm up slow, and then they'll put it through it's not processed. It's preparing the product, so we're granulating it quicker than it would naturally. So as they granulate it. It forms trillions of little crystals, and it becomes a cream product.
Cream honey,
yeah, very good on your palate or your tongue.
Yeah, I need to try some of that sometime. I've never tried canola honey.
Very smooth, very mild type of honey. Really good in your coffee in the morning. And so we have market share across Canada, and then we sell it for a lot of money in other places. Yeah, I think one of the reasons why Americans don't buy it as much because they're more familiar with a stronger, darker taste honey. You guys produce more of a darker honey down there, and they're not familiar with this white, mild type honey coming down. They don't know what it is.
I prefer that, actually. I prefer the alfalfa, clover, probably canola. Anyway, well, let's go ahead and just quick in summary here. I'd like to show everyone I appreciate the super chat, super stickers. Brian, thanks for $20. What are you laughing at? Freedom apiaries?
No, my comment that I put on there.
Oh, an American Beekeeper blog. American Beekeepers blog. There you go.
Jeez.
Somebody needs to take that title. Yeah. Freedom apiaries. Thanks, Pat, for the $20. Kenneth Bach, thanks for $10. Release the Kraken, he says. Kraken.
It's not Kraken season yet.
Greg, thanks so much. And Greg, we'll talk in just a minute as we close out. We'll let you close out and talk just briefly about your Endura Hive stuff that's going on. And I appreciate that, Greg. And Brian Lee. Brian is always a great friend of mine. Went to a ball game with him a week ago tomorrow up in Troy. He's a Troy graduate, about an hour north of us. We had a good time there. And so I appreciate all you guys. Quickly, if we kind of go around the horn, Brian, what do you got coming up for us in the next few days?
I tell you, it's just right now, I'm just feed. That is it. It's just go over, I ran out to the store this evening and bought a couple 25-pound bags of sugar so that I can mix that up. But it's just make sure that they have the feed. And our temps up here, we normally have our first frost around, it's the first week of October. They're not predicting our first frost for another week or so. So we're going to be almost 2 weeks late on our first frost. So I'm hoping that plays into my hand and that I can really pack some weight on these colonies. So we'll see, though. I'll keep it at them.
What is a frost? What is that? This early in the year? What the heck?
Get out of here.
We're still, today was beautiful. I got off work. Working in that hospital all day. I walk out, it's so pretty. It was like 75, 80 degrees, sunny, a breeze blowing. Now we are several hundred miles, 200 or 300 miles away from that nasty hurricane that's coming on shore right now. So my goodness, those poor people down there are getting hammered right now as we speak. But we had beautiful weather up here today. A little breezy, maybe some outskirts of that thing, but it was just a real beautiful day. As far as I'm concerned here, just going to be throwing some Apogard treatments on the bees, feeding as needed. I'm going to run down and get some syrup from Tyler Friday morning and just kind of be just checking them and doing what we do. Ian, you got any final words for us?
No, I just appreciate you allowing me to hop on here and speak my mind. I think I spoke my mind in a few things, but I'm tired, so I don't have a filter. So there you go.
No, you did great, and we appreciate you coming on. I know you're a busy man. I can't even imagine how you do what you do. Greg does what he does. You guys are just incredible. Running not only the bees, but you're also running the big farm on top of that with your family. I guess that's pretty awesome to be able to do that. But it's exhausting. It's hard work, and we have a lot of farming families down here. So, I grew up on a farm, but it was more of an animal, like 100-acre animal type farm, horse farm, and we did some stuff. But we didn't do the row cropping and all that crazy stuff. But we do have a lot of pretty large scale farmers down here that just burn the oil on both ends, and that's pretty crazy. So we appreciate what you do up there, and we appreciate your channel. And as far as my channel goes, I've backed off a little bit on my videos lately. I did do one on the wax melter I got from Thorn Manufacturing, and I plan to put some more out, but I just needed to back off a little bit and just focus on some other things here for a little while. So Greg, we're going to turn it over to you. I'd like you to take just a minute. You posted today about your Endura Hive. If you could talk briefly about that and then close it out for us.
Well, thank Ian for spending time. I know I can only imagine how busy he is in his operation, and having Ian on. When I think about Ian and Canada, I think of them as friends of the North. And what's interesting is he's dedicated and focused on providing clean Canadian products to those store shelves, and that's really important. And truth be told, I think a lot of us in the States could learn a lot from that. It's our patriotism, our economic concern, our environmental concern, and loyalty for a lot of folks is only as far as the dollar, unfortunately. That's the sad truth of the matter. And the last question that we posted, it's going to be the bane of the existence of this industry when it comes to honey packing and honey production. It's actually an interesting thing. I've got an entire storm brewing on the inside, and both thought and emotion on this, so I'll spare you the collateral damage on that here at the moment. But so many folks are saying, the prices are so low, and woe is me, and that we can't get the prices up. And the same person who's complaining that the prices are so low by wholesale or barrel are the same folks who are voting with their dollars, and they're buying all the Chinese equipment to bring them into their apiaries to produce all of this honey, and then they get offended that the honey coming in from China is offsetting the price of their product and they can't compete. Like, at some point we have to decide, what are we doing here? Whether it's Canada or if it's the United States, if we want to make our apiaries great again, if we want to make our countries great again, we probably need to start talking about making products made in America great again. That's a horse of a different color. That's a much bigger and longer conversation. But at some point we're going to have to take responsibility for the outcomes over the next 10 years and do something about it, or quit complaining. And that's, anyways, I'm going to leave that one right there for now, but I appreciate hearing about Ian and what he's doing, and a lot of folks here in the United States. I think we could learn a lot from that. I'm still fired up and brokenhearted about all the folks in the Appalachia region right now, as we are all sitting here from the comforts of electricity and warmth and food and coffee and Wi-Fi. There are so many folks getting bombarded right now with surge waters from Milton coming back in on the heels of Helene, and it just, my heart breaks for them. We're keeping them in our thoughts and prayers, and it's all fun and games. Everyone has a plan till they get punched in the face, as Mike Tyson would say. Whether it's beekeeping, it's life, your property. It's tough. So again, Ian, I appreciate you and your perspective and bringing that to us. There's always so many good takeaways from that. Bruce, what's going on here, with us is it's bittersweet. Right now there's everything going on externally, which is affecting how we are thinking and processing and doing. At the same time, this is the time of season we're ramping up and we're excited. And we've got all the wax dipping things going nonstop, and we're producing products and getting all the pricing, all these things out for the big Bee Expo and the conferences and the presentations and the talks, and that's exciting. But right now, I feel like a lot of it's being overshadowed with what's going on in the current events. We have launched, and I wanted the folks here on the stream team to know first, we have officially launched our Bee Expo pricing for Nature's Image Farm, our EnduraHive wax dip line of equipment, bucket feeders, plugs, double screen boards. We'll have a lot more products that we're going to be rolling out each week or every month until we get to Expo time. So if you're interested in the best wax dip boxes at the best prices, bucket feeders, plugs, check us out at nature'simagefarm.com. At the top of the website, you'll see Bee Expo prior specials at the very top. Click on those. We're able to offer the best wax dip boxes on the market for less than $20. You can't beat it. We've got limited stock. We can only bring so many semis of that. So if you're interested in it, don't wait. Go ahead and secure your equipment now. We're looking forward, as a stream team, seeing everybody at the Bee Expo. We're going to see Ian here at the end of January up in Wisconsin with so many great beekeepers too. That's what it's about. I love these moments like this, the moments in person. If we have the opportunity to break bread, have a cup of coffee in person, those are truly special moments in life. And so that's where we're at right now. Again, there's so many storms brewing right now internally, so many things I want to say, but right now I'm grateful. We're blessed to be, all of us are blessed to be where we're at right now, and just nothing but gratitude. Our hearts are breaking for those who are suffering right now. Just know that our thoughts and prayers are with you. Next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern on the Nature's Image Farm YouTube channel, another stream team beekeeping chat. Until then, we want to remind you to be the lighthouse and be the change you want to see in this world. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.